Hello everyone, this is Amanda McGuire and this is my week 2 discussion board for MPA 594. For this week's discussion, I'm going to be talking about a real world situation or event that's occurring actually, and how it relates to public administration theorists and concepts. So to give you a little bit of a background here, sorry, the situation I want to discuss is basically a law that was put into place in 2019, I believe, needed to be and has to be implemented by 2023 that affects individuals with developmental disabilities and the services that they receive. So the services in the state of California, as well as across the country, although they vary state by state in how they are provided, all of them are funded dually by both the state and federal dollars. So the federal dollars tied to this are basically what gives us this new regulation, which I will go into more detail moving forward as I discuss the theories. But basically, the bottom line is that the change is for services to be more inclusive, including their residential service, their day programs, teaching them to be more independent and to have jobs in the community, to basically to treat individuals with developmental disabilities just like those without. So to better explain the funding, we look to the concept of cooperative federalism. Cooperative federalism is basically where the state and the federal government both work together to provide a service. They may have overlapping regulations or overlapping duties, so to speak, in the services that are provided, so they need to work together to do so. A lot of times, funding that is tied to this type of federalism or federal dollars comes with requirements. In this case, the Department of Health and Human Services, which oversees Medicare, which is the federal portion of the funding for individuals with developmental disabilities, put forth, like I was just talking about, this new final rule called Home and Community-Based Services, which has to be in effect by 2023. And this basically said that, yes, Department of Developmental Services in each state, we will give you money, but you're going to have to cooperate with us. And this money comes with regulations that you now have to put in place. Taking it a step further, we look to Woodrow Wilson's politics and administration dichotomy, where there is a clear separation between the legislative branch that creates policy and the judicial branch that implements that policy, or in our case, in public administration, the legislative government that creates policies and regulations, and those of us that work for the different government organizations or nonprofits like myself with Regional Center that implement this policy. So as the example I just gave, with this new fund or with this continued funding under Medicare, which is federally funded, new guidelines were put into place with the Department of Developmental Services, who then has to pass them on to Regional Center, who we pass on to our vendors to implement to make sure that the services being provided are done so within those guidelines to give people the most inclusive life possible. Now moving on into the implementation of these new guidelines, we look to Max Weber's 6 characteristics of bureaucracy. This theory fits pretty well, perfectly, in the management of a nonprofit such as Inland Regional Center or other public administrative entities. So in this case, there is a clear hierarchy of command from the directive given from the federal government and the dollars that are tied to it to the state, that is then passed down to Regional Center, and then Regional Center is then uses certain staff that are responsible to basically implement these changes and work with our vendors to make it happen, making changes to their guidelines, to their designs for their programming, creating new services and those things. So in order to do that, we have to give these jobs to people that have the background and the competence to do so, which also falls under the 6 characteristics. As well as overall, these rules, the state of California had to write a plan on how it was going to be implemented that was approved by the federal government. And from there, regional centers then had to take that written plan and create our own. And then we required that all the service providers did so as well. So it's sort of a trickle-down effect, but everybody falls under these characteristics of bureaucracy in order to implement this whole change. So of the theories that I discussed today, cooperative federalism still holds. I believe that the federal dollars, which are tied to certain things, or just the overlapping of federal and state services that are being provided, is necessary. Sometimes there's no way to avoid that in order to give full care to individuals. The separation of politics and administration, I think, needs to be looked at again and possibly changed a bit. And maybe looking to Mary Parker Follett here with her cooperation, because the guidelines given were written by those that are separate from those that implement them. So they don't have a clear picture of all of the different variations and services that these individuals need. So there really needs to be a cooperation between those that are implementing the services and those making the regulations. So maybe sort of a bridge in between instead of such a clear-cut separation. And then finally, Max Weber's bureaucracy, I think, still holds water. It's important that there is a clear hierarchy, there are clear guidelines to regulate things, and even maybe the only thing there that could be tweaked a bit is the impersonal relationship between managers and their subordinates, because in my experience, both as a manager and working for different managers, I have found that remaining impersonal does not always mean that you're necessarily going to be approachable. And if you're not approachable, there's not such a great team effort there. So that's all I have for this week. Thank you very much.